This episode is brought to you by ZappyCode. ZappyCode.com. ZappyCode with clear malice in its intent and without provocation thinks you should learn to code. It's disgusting. They have courses like Django and Django 3 and iOS 13 and Swift UI. And they're like, hey, we think you, journalist, should contribute to society by learning to code just like truck drivers do. So come on over. How hateful and mean. ZappyCode, you name the price. $5 a month, $45 a month. There's literally a slider. Okay, that's cool. That's like it was like Bandcamp. ZappyCode.com. Wow. ZappyCode. We hate you because you should learn to code. Learn to code, journalist. All right. Thank you. Thank you, ZappyCode. So that's if people pay me Bitcoin on my website, then I will make a fake ad for them. And so thank you, ZappyCode.com, for buying a fake ad. I hope I was libelous. Hello, and welcome to Cyberdeck Users Weekly, a rarely updated podcast about how to own technology. My name is Paul Miller, and I'm so sorry for how few episodes there have been. I don't know why I joke when I'm talking about serious things. This is serious, and if you're supporting me on Patreon, I feel like I'm stealing. You should probably cancel. I should probably just shut that thing down. I keep on thinking I'm going to get back into this, and it's not happening. And anyways, that's where I'm at. But I've had an idea that I've been thinking about for a while. And it's basically, are we on the precipice of civilization collapsing? And so I go back and forth, to be honest. There's a lot of things in our favor, and there's a lot of things working against us. Like, I just double-clicked a file on my Mac, and the Mac thought Xcode was the thing that should open that file. So that sucks, But some things don't suck. And so I just want to talk it through kind of where I kind of started. I've been thinking about this for a while, but where I kind of started formulating this into like a podcast idea was this sort of like global competence index. Like is our sum total of accessible competence going up or down? I used to have a very naive view of progress in that you can't have negative progress, right? Because once something's been discovered, once we figure out how to make a light bulb, we can't unlearn how to make a light bulb, right? Well, turns out you're wrong, because you know who doesn't know how to make a light bulb? Me. And a lot of other people, turns out, don't know how. And so if you lose knowledge, if knowledge isn't successfully passed down, you can lose it. And while you would think, well, that's got to all be in books. Light bulbs, thankfully, are in books. But there's a lot of knowledge that hasn't been written down. Or if it has been written down, we might not know where to look for it. Like you might not, that thing when you're like really early in a learning process is you don't even know the words for things yet. So it's like really frustrating. And then your education can speed up just by knowing like what to Google for, basically. So, so we can get dumber, is what I'm saying, and it's happened. It's happened in the past. There's a lot of knowledge and science and math in like the Roman times, for instance, that was lost. There's that clock thing that people found in the water, and it's like, oh, it's like a computer, but it's like from a million years ago. So we can definitely lose knowledge, and funny thing about that is you don't really know what you've lost. Because you forgot about it. The whole problem was forgetting. So we don't really know which ways we are regressing. One of the big ones that I bring up in casual conversation a lot is the Empire State Building, because I always forget the exact number. Empire State Building. I'm gonna look this up on Wikipedia so I get the number right. Oh, wow. I'm on a different Mac than I've used, and it has Google as the default. And what a trash. Construction started March 17, 1930. Completed April 11th, 1931. Like, can you imagine? And I lived in New York I'm in New York right now, but I've been on and off. But during the construction of One World Trade. So that, let's see. Construction started in 2006. The building topped out in 2013 and opened in 2014. The observatory opened in 2015, right? One World Trade Center is taller than the Empire State Building, as far as I know. But it's not 10 times taller, Like, what's up? Why are we worse? Because there's a lot of things that were a lot more efficient. Like, if in the 1930s you tried to build a television, like a flat screen, I don't even know. We didn't really have like transistors at that point, or they were just new on the scene. But you know what I mean? Like, even if someone gave you all the ideas and all the plans and all the specs and all the instructions how to build every little piece of it, it would have been a huge it would have been like more than a Manhattan project to build one TV. And now we make just millions of TVs, right? So we've gotten way more efficient at building some things, but other things less efficient. And why is that? Are the Masons hiding knowledge from us? I would probably tend to blame regulation for a lot of it, but there's something feels really off about it. There's this really like this quote from Pierre Rochard. I don't. Maybe he's quoting Albert Einstein, but that's always a meme when you quote Albert Einstein. But no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. And so, insofar as we have issues in our world and things that we don't like, things that aren't great, we can't beat those with like the exact same ideas that got us there. So we need innovation, we need new ideas, and we need to maintain existing knowledge. And so like, because I've been thinking about this, I am kind of picking up anecdotes, and it's really very cherry picking, but like that, the observatory, that space telescope from the James Bond movie, like, and a cable snapped, and so the telescope is like basically broken. Like, I don't know whose fault that is. I don't know enough about this, telescope, and obviously I wasn't on the scene keeping track of how good the cables are. So it's like, who am I to blame other people for failing to maintain this? But like, that felt very like idiocracy to me, where it's like, we built great things in the past and we're coasting on like prior accomplishments. The let's see, another anecdote that kind of stuck out to me was there was like this Twitter trend. I don't know, it's hard to tell when it's like a highly targeted Twitter trend or if it's like a whole, like a worldwide Twitter trend. But it says Gary Vee still preaches the hustle gospel in the middle of a pandemic. And then the pull quote from this article, which I have not bothered to read because it seems like trash, but not all achievement, then M dash, not any achievement, is only a matter of working hard and having talent. But Gary Vee has not previously dwelled on that, which I don't even know what you're trying to say. And so it's like, oh, and here's another caption of this article. His message is what so many desperate people want to hear right now. It's also dangerous. And so you can hate Gary Vee for whatever reason, but do you hate hustle? Because it sounds like you hate hustle. And the idea that we are going to improve anything in the world without trying really hard, I think a lot of people have in the mind, especially if you have that more naive understanding of progress, that you just build on progress, right? So you get all the progress that you already have for free. And then if you bother to wake up in the morning, you've created some more progress. What I'm saying is that we're treading water and we have a huge, well, so much progress, a huge upkeep cost. Especially messy progress that wasn't that well thought out, something that maybe was a malinvestment. And so we have this technology, but it's almost a little too advanced for us. So it's really expensive and it's taking a lot of our brain time. So we have this upkeep cost. I don't think we're paying it right now. But even if we are, to get more innovation, we're going to have to hustle. We're going to have to work hard and we're going to have to try hard to have a better civilization. And it doesn't come for free. And it's not like there's just some cabal, the Masons or whatever. There's plenty of cabals out there. But there isn't some sort of other that is hoarding all of the power and innovation and wealth away from everybody else. And if they would just be so kind as to give it to everybody else, then all of our problems would be solved. And so that there's this mindset that if I just yell loud enough or politics hard enough or whatever, that this, all the good things can be mine. Whereas I think most of the good things will come from what we individually each create. Even if there is huge injustice or whatever, and even if there is mega stealing and stuff, the long game of my life, the only thing I'm ever going to get is the things that I steal back from the stealers or whatever. It seems not as big of a win as the act of creation of actually making things, actually innovating, actually building on what we've got so far. Actually hustling. So let's see. So I've got to know who will solve our problems. Who will improve our lives? And again, because I think this way, that it's us individually acting that will make us richer and more successful, and not trying to get it from somebody else, that any sort of restrictions on what we can and can't do is going to be a big problem. There was this really cool tweet from Saifuddin Ammous. I've been on Twitter a lot lately. Actually, I've been thinking about cutting back. Maybe blocking myself from Twitter, like, except for like an hour a day or something. Anyways, there's still some good stuff on there. Saifedean has this bank ad called The Pleasure of Walking Tall. And he's contrasting it. This is an old-timey bank ad. And he's contrasting it with this modern-day bank ad. It says, can't get a home loan? Think again. FHA loans, bad credit, okay, low closing costs. And then here's The Pleasure of Walking Tall. It's pretty long, but it's really good. Your savings, believe it or not, affect the way you stand, the way you walk, the tone of your voice. In short, your physical well-being and self-confidence. A man without savings is always running. He must take the first job offered, or nearly so. He sits nervously on life's chairs because any small emergency throws him into the hands of others. Without savings, a man must be too grateful. Gratitude is a fine thing in its place, but a constant state of gratitude is a horrible place in which to live. A man with savings can walk tall. He may appraise opportunities in a relaxed way, have time for judicious estimates, and not be rushed by economic necessity. A man with savings can afford to resign from his job if his principles so dictate, and for this reason, he'll never need to do so. A man who can afford to quit is much more useful to his company and therefore more promotable. He can afford to give his company the benefits of his most candid judgments. A man always concerned about necessities, such as food and rent, can't afford to think in long-range career terms. He must dart to the most immediate opportunity for ready cash. Without savings, he will spend a lifetime of dodging. A man with savings can afford the wonderful privilege of being generous in family or neighborhood emergencies. He can take a level stare into the eyes of any man, friend, stranger, or enemy. It shapes his personality and character. The ability to save has nothing to do with the size of income. Many high-income people who spend it all are on a treadmill darting through life like minnows. The dean of American bankers, J.P. Morgan, once advised a young broker, take waste out of your spending, you'll drive the haste out of your life. Will Rogers put it this way, I'd rather have the company of a janitor living on what he earned last year than an actor spending what he'll earn next year. If you don't need money for college, a home, or retirement, then save for self-confidence. The state of your savings does have a lot to do with how tall you walk. It's an ad by First Federal Savings and Loan Association of St. Petersburg. So it's really cool. There's something that's really interesting about this idea of saving. You're really putting yourself in a position where you aren't the treading water. You're not the upkeep cost, the velocity of how hard you need to work to pay off your all the loans that you got from the FHA or whatever. By reducing that, you can focus more on the future and you can have more peace of mind. I think it's really one of the big things that has made Bitcoin like be so impactful in my life is here's a reason to save. Here's a money that seems secure and safe and strong and designed for the future of things and designed with number go up technology and all that. And so it feels really wonderful and necessary and important to save. And therefore I've saved Bitcoin a lot more effectively than I ever saved dollars. And that has given me like a great peace of mind. I'm not Bitcoin rich, but I'm getting richer. And that is an amazing feeling. Instead of like I'm trying to squeeze in another purchase into my credit limit, where I'm like, I'm causing myself so much future suffering for this temporary thing that maybe I need or maybe I don't. So saving. If you could take that as a metaphor for our whole society, like are we living on borrowed money in a grand sense, in everything we do, not just monetarily, because obviously monetarily we are living on borrowed money as a society and as the U.S. government. But in a broader sense, technologically, like, do we coast on older achievements? Like, why is Unix still the most important operating system? Like, are we coasting on that, or was it just such a good foundation that we could build off of that? Like, why are there are only two commercial operating systems, Windows and Mac OS? Are they so good that they really only need those two options, or are we coasting on that? Why, with everybody agrees that the patent system is totally messed up, but why does it never get better? Are we too content to hobble along with really broken systems that work for the big stakeholders, but not for up and comers? Like, why do we tolerate that? And like, why are we okay with that? There's so many inefficiencies when you look around the world and you just look at a process and you see how dumb it's being done. You can typically, with a little digging, figure out why it's being done in such a dumb way. It's like, oh, well, of course you need like just two or whatever it is. There's a very small number of food processors in the whole United States. And it's like, well, why is that? That doesn't seem very natural. And so there's a lot of shipping costs, and a lot of food goes from the farms to more centralized places for processing, which is like, it doesn't really make sense because there is like, we do like export food, but a lot of the demand for food is pretty local. So why don't you have a farm locally, you have a consumer locally, but why is the processor not local as well? And there's, of course, I'm sure there's some economies of scale, but also has a lot to do with regulation. And there's this and this and this, and there's this reason, and you end up with this wild Rube Goldberg machine that gets you with a result, but it seems so inefficient. And we're so rich as a society that we can tolerate a lot of these inefficiencies. And so it's interesting, like, maybe if we start to slide, maybe we'll repair some of these inefficiencies. Like, we had a lot of problems with, like, nobody's allowed to make masks because you need like a license to make a mask. And we need masks all of a sudden. It was actually a need, all of a sudden the government's able to like say, don't worry about those rules. So you kind of realize how many inefficiencies these government rules are making for us. But I don't want to be all like blame government for everything, because I do think in some senses we're content. And that's where I'm at a lot of times with, I'm using a Mac right now for audio recording because it doesn't really work on Linux. And, a lot of times I'm content, and I can sit around being so mad at like Microsoft for all of its horrible history, and Apple for its anti-developer practices and stuff like that, and I can gripe about it, but there's really, I don't improve through that griping, and pointing out that stuff doesn't really get me a lot. The only thing that would really improve is if I find better alternatives and I use them, or I help build them. So yeah, let's see. Yeah. Okay. So I've got these very negative thoughts that I have like the itchiest nose, and I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to itch my nose. Wow. That's absurd how itchy that was. We have this, or I have this thought. It's like, okay, one way to avoid this, if let's say society is headed towards collapse, like we just can't, like I wake up one day after maybe a few months of intermittent blackouts, the blackout is just total, right? Or like, let's say like after uh, years of horrible subway service, the subway just kind of stops working in New York, like, or it just the world goes full civil war or whatever. I think a lot about well, what if I could just right now, while things are okay, go get a ranch or a farm or whatever, someplace with a lot of land where I can grow my own food. And so I think of like the Little House on the Prairie time. I don't know if you've read these books. The Little House on the Prairie is very formative. Not, I don't know if formative is the right word. Just there's like my Harry Potter at the time. Like there was Narnia, there was Little House on the Prairie. My mom actually read the Little House on the Prairie books to us out loud when I was growing up. So they are always like one bad winter from just, if not starving to death, being like really on the precipice. They're really they're struggling, but in a sense, that's real life. That's just like what most of human history is like. Like it's very rare. Like we didn't have typically a lot of ways to preserve food for a long period in the future, except for I guess like granaries, and then like they would like salt their meat and try to like keep it good like that for a while. But they didn't have like freezers and stuff. So they were really susceptible to like droughts and famines and bad weather or whatever. So it's interesting. Like I if I put myself in this ranching position, it's not like I'm necessarily that much. It feels really great in the sense that I would be taking hold of my own life and be much more, in some sense, control or control's not the right word because there's still so much out of my control, but in some sense more integral to my continued survival if like I'm raising my own food basically. But at the same time, like my actual fragility index is not really that much improved because, in New York, I'm like one bad natural disaster or whatever from collapse. And then in a farm, I'm kind of one bad natural disaster. And like, if I'm thinking about it in that global competence index kind of way, like is our sum total of accessible competence going up or down? Well, in one sense, my individual competence to do very vital things like raise food for myself and some theoretical family I might have, that's going up. But as far as specialization, like the reason that we are so wealthy and so have such a huge economy and so much is like a lot of it has to do with specialization. I'm sort of, in some sense, removing knowledge from the economy. I'm going to do something I'm way worse at, which is taking care of cows, than something I'm not the world's greatest at, which is programming. But if I think of it in like an economic sense, like what does the world value more? Well, they definitely seem to right now value me more as a programmer than as a rancher. And maybe I should look into ranch hand, salaries. Maybe like I'm missing out, and like maybe what we really need is ranch hands, and the economy is trying to signal that, and I should be paying better attention. But I probably wouldn't be that great of a ranch hand. I didn't really grow up that life. I've always been just kind of a nerd hanging out with computers mostly. So that's one of the ones where like that calculation of, and maybe it's a romanticism, maybe it's it's all rooted in fear, maybe it's accurate fear, but this idea of escaping the city to some sort of idyllic ranch life as a hedge against the apocalypse is maybe not completely it's clearly I haven't done the full math on it because I can't quite tell if that makes me safer or less safe, if it makes me stronger or less strong, if it makes society stronger or less strong. Like there's this thought of like agorism or agorism, however you want to say it, that you sort of like kind of retreat from society and you just trade with other people like kind of directly, and you don't, you kind of just, you get off of the typical grind, and you just do stuff that's useful to you kind of in your neighbors, and you trade directly with people, and you don't pay much taxes because you don't have income in a traditional way. That kind of is really interesting. It's hard for me to tell if that's richer. Like in some sense, like, yeah, if you had a whole community of people, like obviously their life becomes much more stable once they live in a town, in the Little House on the Prairie books. So having a whole community of people to trade with, like there can be more resiliency, but I don't know if you can reach the same level of height or the heights or the technological level, the strength and resiliency of a really truly modern economy, which would be global, like a global economy. But maybe what we're seeing are the weaknesses of having a global economy, that, there can be shocks to that. So maybe that isn't the strength. You know what I mean? I'm obviously going in circles here, but that's something I've been thinking about, and I can't quite figure it out. So let me know in the comments down below. What would the most important thing to do be to truly improve civilization? Like add the most points to our global competence index, the sum total of accessible competence. Like, what do we need to get better at the most? What would be the most valuable for us society wise to get better at? So I've been thinking a lot about make housing more affordable. I'm on this whole YouTube trip of just like people who like live in weird arrangements where it's like they've got like a prefab in the backyard of somebody's house or something like that. There's a lot of weird prefabs where like I live in a hole in a, like in the middle of a field of my rich friend or something like that. A lot of really interesting alternative styles of living, a lot of tiny homes, There's also van life. I'm trying to avoid that, I don't want YouTube's algorithm to think that's who I am, because I feel like there's a lot of baggage with that. So I avoid the van life videos. But yeah, these alternative forms of living are really interesting, but a lot of times they don't seem to make housing any cheaper. So that would be, which a lot of it has to do with land. But the thing is land is actually pretty cheap away from places where people densely congregate. So of course there is lots of free land, or not free, but relatively open and relatively affordable land in the United States. But it's more about can it be close to a population center, and then the housing constructions. This is back to the Empire State Building problem. Like housing costs a lot to build as well, in addition to the land. Like, could we make the house part of it at least half as expensive? What could we do to make that cheaper? I think that would be really interesting, and I do think that would help civilization, because right now, like everybody that quote unquote owns a house is like like a 20. Not everybody. Most of everybody who owns a house these days is in like some insane like 20-year mortgage, and maybe they paid 20% of the house or 50% of the house or whatever, but very few people really own the house outright. Could we get to more, those walking tall people, with that resilience, so that they can say, like, they could point out bullshit when they see it, because they're not, living in like a treadmill where they have to keep hitting this mortgage so they can't, say what they think. Can we make food more affordable? Food's pretty expensive, and I feel like it seems like the most impacted by inflation. As we print more money, our phones get just a little more expensive. Our TVs seem to get cheaper, but our food it's very expensive. Like the thing I want to eat these days is steak usually, which is like for a steak that I like is typically like $12 a pound, which is a lot. It's a lot of money. I mean, that's like a restaurant meal at like a nice mid-tier restaurant. Mid-tier in the sense of like not McDonald's, but above McDonald's. You can eat, a lot of things that are bad for you for $12, or you can get one steak, So, how do we make that more affordable? I kind of already touched on that with like regulation and stuff, but I would hope and I would assume that there's also a lot of more innovation to be done there. And then what are the support goods for housing and food? Which a lot of that comes down to energy. A lot of it's transportation cost, right? So you have the labor, which is in some sense kind of minimal, even for building a house. I mean, not minimal, but if you think of like what is like 10 people's day rate for like 2 weeks, I guess that's a decent amount of money anyways. Never mind. I guess labor is pretty intensive for building. But maybe we can find a way to reduce labor by improving house technology, which is kind of the premise of this YouTube hole, but it just doesn't ever seem to work out. But energy, transportation costs are huge. So how can we improve those? I do think those would be really valuable things. I guess what I'm saying is that software does not seem to be the big... Like, obviously, it helps a lot in, I don't know, it's hard to say intangible, but like kind of intangible ways like communication and, coordination, that kind of thing with technology. But the key work that makes us richer individually is very physical, and software really can't reduce the amount of work done unless it can coordinate us better to do less wasted work. But in some sense, like, if you're going to get calories from food, those calories got to come from somewhere real, physical. You don't make the same amount of food with like less input. You always have the same input. Is always going to weigh the same amount to take it from one place to another. So how do you do it efficiently and find ways to do it cheaper? I don't know. It's just like I love computers so much and I love technology so much, but it's just like my like passion project is like this text editor kind of thing, or kind of like a notational velocity clone, and I'll do it eventually, and it'll be helpful to me as like a person who likes to write down my ideas and stuff. But like that, how much impact do I really have on like the bottom line of our like civilizational progress? Like it doesn't feel like a lot, so don't quite know what to do with that. So one thing that on the upside, I've been kind of noticing that technology is kind of good right now in a lot of ways. This was kind of kicked off another Twitter tweet. I don't think I follow this person. I think it was a retweet. But how often does the software you use, this is Mason Ramali, a Rust developer. How often does the software you use on a daily basis, including web apps, etc., succeed at fulfilling its core purpose without unreasonable levels of friction? So the poll has 13% say almost always, 21% say very rarely, half the time it is 30%, more often than not is 36.1. So wait, from most positive to most negative, almost always 13%, more often than not 36%, about half the time 29%, very rarely 21%. And there's some decimals in there. So like, this is not science. There's 144 votes, but it was really interesting. I voted more often than not, but I'm not even sure about that. It might be almost always. And when software fails, it is so frustrating and it's so indecipherable. Even when you're the person building the software, it's so indecipherable. So like even more so as a user. That's what really stands out. But if you think of how much functional software we have and how much it does, and like I bemoan, like I was, the computer book I was reading the other day that's talking about that, the mother of all demos, and they had like video conferencing and a mouse and like drawing on the screen and graphics and like collaborative editing, teleconference stuff, like all working in like the 70s or it might have been, I think the mother of all demos was actually late 60s. Let me look this up. And of course this like tech language, 1968. For a long time, and then like a lot of it ended up at Xerox PARC, and then some very small subset of it got popularized by the Macintosh. So in some senses, like I feel like software could be way better, but in the sense that there's so many things that don't work at all, or seem to be just completely counterproductive in the world, or totally messed up. I feel like I mean, I've spent so much. It's weird for me to say any of this because I've spent so much time hating on software, like all these Electron apps, and they're bloated and they use too much RAM and they're inefficient for what they do. And yeah, but like we've got like ray traced Minecraft, people. Like I don't know. There's a lot. There's a lot that's working. Like what you can do in a browser these days is bonkers with like WebAssembly and like WebGL, and I think there's like a new there's a new kind of more even better graphics coming to the web. Like people do VR in the web, but obviously the world isn't all the web, but it kind of is mostly the web. But I've been thinking about it's been standing out to me things that are just like are amazing. So one of these, and I've brought YouTube up a couple times, but YouTube's ability to respond to what I'm into right now is amazing. And sometimes it's frustrating because it's too fast, and sometimes it's frustrating because it's too slow. But a lot of times it seems like it's pretty correct. And I could think of a million ways I'd want to improve it. The algorithm could be much better tuned if I had like some sliders, I think. But without me having any sliders, YouTube is really amazing. So when I get like into some new thing, YouTube's like, we got you. We know all about this thing, and we will show you so many new things. And so like as long as you're not interested in anything controversial or political, I think YouTube is just wonderful. Fulfilling its core purpose. I mean, like it's wild. It's funny because like the original concept of YouTube felt like it was like the YouTube in you was the you part of the tube was that you make videos and put them on the internet. But I feel like now what YouTube is like a TV channel curated to my exact tastes, or very as close as they can get. And it's pretty wonderful, and it's kind of exciting when I find a new thing to be interested in, because YouTube's just ready to show me the years of content that have been built up about that thing. Along those lines, I've been really into drums lately. I found this guy, JD Beck, and he's this little prodigy drummer kid. He's like 16 or 17 or something like that. And it's just amazing. And it's just wonderful. There's something about it. I've seen, I went down like a prodigy, or not a prodigy, just like genius drummer kick back when Whiplash came out. But there's something about JD Beck that I actually really like it as music. That it's like mind blowing as music, not just technically interesting as like, wow, this guy's amazing that he can hit drums this fast, but like there's something about it musically that I love. Anyways, so that led me to like, okay, well, I'll learn to play the drums. I've always kind of meant to learn some drums because my timing, I've always been musical, but my timing's been pretty bad. So then I get this software called Melodics, and it's kind of like Guitar Hero, but for drums and piano. And it has all these lessons, and they start out real easy, and you play with a metronome, you see the notes scrolling by, and so you know if you're late or early or on time. And so I've been learning finger drumming. I got like a drum pad. So I mean, it's amazing. I bought that on Amazon, right? And they like when they're not shipping you something counterfeit, they're amazing. And like they give you, so I got a drum pad like 2 days after I decided I wanted a drum pad. It's in my house, and it could be better. I could think of a way that drum pad could be in my house that same day without maybe not having the Amazon middleman, and maybe we could get rid of counterfeiting problems. Things could be so much better, but still very amazing. And the technology works, and this Melodics and this drum pad just work, and I'm learning a lot very quickly, which is wonderful. I've been using City Bike to get around the city recently, which is great, and it's very technologically enabled because their kiosks are horrible. But if you just have an app, you just get an unlock code and you're ready to go. It's not as good as like scooters in Austin or whatever, but it's pretty nice, and that's sort of technologically enabled. One of my favorite things in the world is Udemy, which is kind of along that Melodics and YouTube thing where it's like, there's tons of things to learn. Most of them happen to be technology things. So maybe this will all let me down if I ever move to a ranch and try to learn how to take care of a cow. But I love learning, and Udemy makes it like very cheap to pay for really high quality education, and it's wonderful. So I love all of that. And one of the things it brought me to is, and I should probably wrap up on this. Maybe this ties it all together. Amazon Halo. Wow. They just full sent. They just went wild, and they made this product that it seems like, I don't know, based on like my Twitter circle, seems like nobody wants, but for various reasons, it's very interesting to me. So this band has no screen. It just has the sensors of a smartwatch. So it can, accelerometer, so it can detect if you're exercising, heart rate, that kind of stuff. But it also has a microphone that's always listening specifically for your tone. And then the other thing is that the app has this, and this isn't totally a new innovation or anything, but the app has this camera mode where you prop up your phone, and then you stand in front of the phone, turn around in your underwear, and it looks at your body fat percentage. And which is really interesting, and it's something, I've been like trying to lose. I have actually lost some weight during the quarantine, which has been great, and been exercising, which has been great. But there's the classic thing. Well, man, if you build a lot, you don't want to just look at the scale because you start building muscle. Muscle's heavier than fat, whatever. Like that's not my biggest problem in the world, but being able to watch gains in a body fat percentage way very accurately would be kind of nice. But it's just totally terrifying and creepy and weird to send that as a picture, send my nudes to Amazon, to Bezos. And the same thing with the microphone. Like they say the microphone, it doesn't upload anything, all local to the watch or whatever, or the Halo band. But it's Amazon, and I mean, as far as I know, they're like CIA collaborators, just like selling us out to, the friendly local intelligence agency. So I don't have any reason to trust them on this. And even if it was provable, I mean, I guess that's the thing. If it was provable that this information would never leave the band or my, it wouldn't ever leave me, I would get this because it's really cool. And especially for me, I have what is known as a flat effect, and it is very mood related. And if I am depressed, I have much more of a monotone. And when I'm higher energy and in a better mood, I'm able to add more up and down pitch to my voice because it's kind of an effort thing for me. And obviously it's not like a perfect science, but there's something to it. And it's very interesting. And I think there's this whole history and world of effective computing where we use computers, where we really own computers, and the computers help us and give us feedback on. They warn us when we're getting angry, when we're sad, when we're mad or bad. They're kind of, and the whole idea would be it's your computer. You not design it necessarily, but you tell it how you want it, what you want it to look for. How you want it to help you. And so it's, people just like to come up with controversies like this is tone policing or whatever, but that's just like, is a computer doing math for you, like shaming you for your math literacy? No, it's a tool. If you decide that emotional intelligence is something that you're struggling with, and you want to take a flyer on a computer, as ridiculous as that sounds, a computer helping signal to you the thing that you want signals on, I think it could be really cool. I think it could be really helpful. It's just like the one of those things where it's like I realized it because when I would be depressed, I'd have a flat effect and I'd be on a podcast. And so I'd be recording my voice and I'd be like listening to my voice in my headphones. And so like once I realized that it was a thing and I was doing podcasts to hear myself, I was able to like catch it better. And it's not a cure for depression. It's good to know sometimes that you're like on a mood slide or whatever. So, I think there's something really great to it. And I guess the thing is that like the way we deliver technology is so messed up through these very specific and huge companies that we can't have nice things like this because they're come off as just mega creepy, because all these big companies have been doing for over a decades kind of is taking our information and selling it to, our government and to each other and using it to train algorithms to like manipulate us. And, I think these companies have clearly demonstrated that they aren't trustworthy or worth the risk of messing around with our private data. But if computers could be truly individual and private because they're our own thing somehow, that's my tagline, like, do you own how to own technology? If we really owned technology instead of just leasing it, I think I would hope that we could come back around to ideas like this with the effective computing and really find really beneficial uses. So maybe technology could be a little bit more beneficial. And I do think it's already great, and I really love it, even if it doesn't make houses and food as cheap as it should, or as I would hope. But anyway, so I guess that's man, good luck finding a real specific thesis there. I guess what I'm saying is that we may or may not be headed towards a total civilizational, technological, societal collapse, or things are good because because YouTube is pretty good and Udemy, and like we actually do have a lot of nice things, and actually we really depend on each other. So like the reactionary way of like I will escape the tragedy by going off on my own might be its own kind of tragedy. So that's what I'm saying, and I hope that is really useful to you. Once again, I would like to thank Zappy Code for sponsoring this episode, and yeah, have a good 7 years until I record another episode.